CIS Countdown is brought to you by Canada Safeway. Canada Safeway is a proud sponsor of the 2011 Vanier Cup, November 25th in Vancouver.
It is a beautiful 7-tanker day in Vancouver, and welcome to CIS Countdown. I'm Jim Mullen as we headed in to Conference Finals Week, and I think the big question out there for everyone who follows Canadian university football is, would the favorites be knocked off? Well, let's start off in Ontario, where the Purple Ponies were a little on the ropes, Andrew.
That's right, Jim. The Yates Cup was on the line with the McMaster Marauders facing the reigning OUA champion Western Mustangs. The Stangs looking for their fourth Yates Cup title in the last 5 years, while McMaster was in search of its first OUA title since 2003. The Marauders' hopes lay on the shoulders of that man right there, Kyle Quinlan, who has been outstanding for McMaster since coming off that suspension. For Western, a banged-up Donnie Marshall returned at pivot after missing the last 5 games. Early on, the Purple Ponies looked to take the lead, but what should have been a chip shot from just 13 yards out turns into a turnover on downs as the Stangs fumble the snap and come away with nothing. Disbelief from holder Darryl Wheeler, who had the butterfingers there, so the game remains scoreless. Move to the final minute of the first Q. Western up 2-0 when disaster strikes again for the Stangs. Steven Ventresca with the block for McMaster. Western would pick up a single point, but clearly Mustangs head coach Greg Marshall doesn't like what he's seeing from his special teams. However, McMaster's special teams were on point on 3rd and short. They fake the punt, and it's Ventresca who picks up the reception for the first down, which leads to this 29-yard field goal. The game is now tied at 3. On the Marauders' next offensive possession, Quinlan shows why he is possibly the most athletic QB in the nation. He escapes the pressure and takes it 22 yards into the Western red zone. The very next play, he follows it up with another big run to move inside the Mustangs 10. And on the next play, it's Chris Pizzetta who finishes off the drive, his 8th major on the season. McMaster takes a 10-3 lead. Under 4 minutes left before the half, and on 2nd and inches, Western on play action goes to 280-pound running back Dan Duff, who takes it down to the Marauders' 2-yard line. Check out the hands on the big man, a 31-yard pick from a very unlikely source, and the home side is knocking on McMaster's door. But the Stangs have trouble punching it in. First, Varga hits the maroon and white wall. Then, backup QB Ian Noble can't drive it through. So on 3rd and goal, Noble tries again, but the Marauders' D-line shuts the door for a 3rd straight time massive play, which preserves McMaster's 10-3 lead, which they took into the locker room. McMaster flipping the script on Western. Remember back in week 2, this goal line stand by the Mustangs helped them take that game. Could this be the shift in momentum that the Marauders would be looking for? Now in the 3rd, McMaster still up by 1 score until this.
See if they can awaken from their mighty slumber. Quinlan looking to do it to the Croce, got him, and on cue, countdown on, 30, 20, 10, touchdown Mac, 102 yards.
Quinlan airs it out to Michael DeCroce, who shows why he's the MVP of the OUA, taking it 102 yards for the major. McMaster slowly putting the knife in the hearts of the Western faithful. Could there be an upset in the making? Shift to the 4th, and the Marauders put in the dagger. Quinlan to Robert, call me Bobby Babick, 12-yard score, and the route is on. It's 27-3, McMaster. 3 minutes later, the visitors put the home side on ice. Quinlan sidesteps the pressure, throws another bomb into the end zone, where Brad Foscisato hauls it in over the defender, and that's all she wrote for the Stangs. McMaster's bench goes crazy. They can smell the champagne. The Marauders win their first Yates Cup title since 2003 and advance to the national semi-final. Quinlan was the man on this day, tossing 275 yards and 4 touchdowns, while also rushing for 103 yards. His favorite target, Heck Creighton nominee Michael DeCroce, hauled in 4 passes for 128 yards and 2 scores. Chris Pizzetta led the Marauders with 151 yards on the ground and a touchdown. Tyler Varga was the lone bright spot for Western on the day, rushing for a game-high 154 yards and 1 touchdown.
We game plan great for this one. I mean, I think we got the best front four in the country, the best linebackers in the country, and the best secondary in the country. I feel we have the best defense in the country, and we showed it today.
We drew it up as just a pump, fake, and go. You know, we caught the defense off guard, and we kind of caught them sleeping. The halfback couldn't get over in time to make a play, so Kyle just threaded that needle and got me in. So I just took it to the end zone.
That play was huge. We had them pinned down, but you know what? Good for them. I thought we were in good position to make a play on that ball, but you know, went over top of our head, and you know, we didn't respond.
McMaster to face the winner of this game between the visiting St. Mary's Huskies and the home side Acadia Axemen. AUS Player of the Year Kyle Graves getting set for this one midway through the first Q. Axemen down 10-7 when Graves channels his inner Doug Flutie, rolling from one side of the field over to the other, looks downfield, and he heaves it to Stu Clow, a 51-yard gain. That led to a touchdown to make it 14-10. Now in the second, Huskies QB Jack Creighton, under pressure, drops the biscuit, picks it up though, but he tosses it right into the hands of Graham Richardson, who scampers downfield before being taken down inside the St. Mary's 15. Huskies head coach Steve Samura does not look pleased there. In the third, Graves puts the game away, rushing in this 10-yard touchdown, making it 29-10. Acadia takes the game 39-20, winning its first Loney Bowl since '06. Graves rushes for 78 yards and 3 touchdowns, while through the air he goes 12 of 16 for 170 yards. Zach Skibbin rushes for 147 yards and 1 touchdown. On the losing side, Jack Creighton went 17 of 30, tossing 1 touchdown, but he also threw those 2 interceptions. McMaster will travel to Atlantic Canada to face the Axemen this Friday, where 2 of the nation's top quarterbacks will face off, with Kyle Quinlan going up against Kyle Graves in the Battle of the Kyles. OUA Defensive Player of the Year Ryan Chmielewski will have the job of shutting down Graves, while AUS Defensive Player of the Year Tom Levinsky will look to contain Quinlan. All right, so one semifinal is now set, so we switch our focus to the other 2 conference championships. In Quebec, it was the Dunsmore Cup between Laval and Montreal, the winner to face the Canada West champion, which was determined in Cowtown. The Hardy Cup featured a showdown between the UBC Thunderbirds and the 3-time reigning Canada West champions, the Calgary Dinos. Billy Green trying to lead UBC to its first Hardy Cup since 1997, down 10-3 in the first. The Canada West Player of the Year goes to the air, hooking up a Jordan Grieve at the 40. Grieve does the rest, cuts to the inside to beat his man, and he's in for the touchdown. Grieve goes 87 yards, and UBC pulls even at 10 on the road. But it was the Eric Dulesky show in Calgary. He fakes the handoff to Stephen Lambala and scampers to his right, dives in for the 3-yard score. That put the Dinos back in the lead. It's now 20-13 at the half. Third quarter, and number 11 sheds the UBC defense once again. The pocket finally collapses, and Dulesky finds running room. He has nothing but end zone, his 3rd rushing touchdown of the game. That made it 27-13, and there was a blowout in the making as the Dinos would pile on 35 points in the 4th Q to take their 4th straight Hardy Cup title. Calgary punches its ticket to the national semifinals with a great game on the ground, rushing for over 400 yards. Dulesky led the attack, rushing for 101 yards and 4 touchdowns, while Stephen Lambala was his usual beastly self, leading all rushers with 194 yards. UBC's Billy Green with a rough night, especially in the second half, throwing 2 pick sixes in the 4th that sealed the Calgary win. Interesting stat, the Dinos have won the last 4 Hardy Cups over 4 different opponents by a combined score of, get this, 201-75. The last 2 by a count of 118-16. Talk about domination. The Dinos awaiting the champion in the queue, while the Rouge et Or are trying to win its 9th straight Dunsmore Cup. Montreal is looking for its first ever conference title. And this won't help the Caravan's cause. While trying to punt from deep in their own zone, Pierre-Paul Jelena fumbles a snap and is forced to run it. Has some room, but he comes up a yard short. The sleet causing havoc early in this one. Of course, Danny Machocha not liking what he's seeing. Next play, Laval makes them pay. Bruno Prudhomme, with plenty of time in the pocket, slings one over the middle to JS Adara, and it's Touche Rouge et Or. JS giving us his best Chad Klassen impression. I swear he must have seen Chad at the Roxy because he stole his dance moves. Laval up 7-zip. Still in the first Q, Sebastian Levesque breaks into the game, smashes through the line, and puts on the afterburners, taking it 40 yards to the house. Laval already up 2 scores, and we're not even through 15 minutes. Move to the third Q, Montreal down 18-0 when they finally break the goose egg. Alexander Nadeau-Pouise on the QB sneak puts the Carabins on the board. It's now 18-7. However, here Levesque shows why he should have been a Heck Creighton nominee. You don't need to speak French to know what the announcer is saying there. Levesque puts the nail in Montreal's coffin, going 85 yards to pay dirt. What a run from Levesque. That made it 25-7. The Rouge et Or would go on to take it 30-7, sealing Laval's 9th straight Dunsmore Cup title. Levesque finishes the day with 197 yards on the ground and those 2 TDs. Prudhomme leaned on Levesque a ton in the win, as he has all season. He ends up 8 for 18 for 145 yards and the 1 touchdown, which came early in the first quarter off Montreal's botched punt. So that sets up a rematch of last year's Vanier Cup between Calgary and Laval. The marquee matchup will be in the backfield as Sebastian Levesque and Steven Lambala face off in what should be a dandy of a ball game. The Dinos will be looking for revenge, this time on their home turf. Of course, the Rouge et Or spanked Calgary in last year's Vanier Cup by a score of 29-2. Well, Jim, we're finally down to the Final Four. I know we'll give our predictions later on in the show, though I wouldn't bet on my pick, seeing as I had Western to win it all.
Yes, Andrew, thanks very much for that. And you have now established yourself as our very own Purple Pony, picking the Western Mustangs to go all the way. Nice tie, too. When we return, we will take a look at the conference award winners and preview the upcoming bowl games. You are watching CIS Countdown.
Welcome back to Vancouver. There's another shot of BC Place. Beautiful day. 47th Vanier Cup is just over a week away, with the final 4 teams fighting for those 2 spots as the road to the championship game continues. Welcome back to CIS Countdown. I'm Chad Klassen. We've got McMaster and Acadia on one side of the bracket, Calgary and Laval on the other side. No question the Dinos and Rouge et Or present the more intriguing matchup on semifinal Friday coming up, but both games should be a slugfest. To talk about those contests and what happened over the weekend in the conference championship games, we're joined by Andrew Wadden at his highlight desk and Jim Mullen here in studio. I guess the one surprise from the weekend, we all knew Calgary was going to probably win the game, the Canada West Championship, but 62-13. The final. How surprised were you at that final?
I think a lot of the points were scored in garbage time in that game, to tell you the truth. After Billy Green threw the interception in the third quarter, the game was really all but over. The UBC Thunderbirds scrambled back in a game earlier this season in Calgary from a similar deficit, but as soon as the pick was put up, it seemed all but done. I was a little frustrated watching the game in that UBC decided to move to double tights, which is a formation that they don't use a lot of, and that really allowed the Calgary interior to take advantage of some of that. They didn't use blocking inside with a Joey Gabrick, for example, and Sam Hurl and Jordan Verdoni were able to get through the offensive line, shut down the UBC running game, and a lot of times Billy Green was peeling himself up off the turf. That's the type of pressure that Calgary's going to have to establish against the Laval Rouge et Or coming up this Friday night.
Yeah, UBC in that final game, the 36-23 win at home, they were able to sort of contain the Dinos' rushing attack. Not so much. What happened on that the interior of the line there? Well,
I think that they were simply outclassed. They were, as Sean Olsen said, they were out-physicaled. And on a number of occasions with offensive linemen pulling around, trying to plug holes, trying to create some gap cancellation. When you're working against a guy like Lyndon Gaydosh on the interior that can move so many players around and create gaps, it doesn't matter if you're pulling a guard around to try to plug something. That hole is so big that you can drive a guy like Sam Hurl or a Verdoni through it. And that's what the UBC Thunderbirds really had to contend with, I think, in the first half. A little frustrating, too, that we've seen Sean Olsen construct offenses in the past that have taken advantage of cover threes and throw underneath and show the patient game. And UBC came out in that game trying to be the big play team, trying to use big play Billy Green to create those points right away. And Calgary would have none of it. Jamal Knowles fell on one play, and that created the UBC touchdown. But full points to Blake Nill and that Calgary team on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively. They played a fantastic game.
Yeah, UBC were in it in a bit. They were only down 20-13. Of course, that 87-yard touchdown to Jordan Grieve late in the first half, but the Dinos win that one. I guess you couldn't call it a surprise with McMaster beating Western in Ontario.
Not for me, maybe for Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew, you picked, obviously you had picked Western to go all the way and win it. How surprised were you that McMaster just went in and cleaned house?
I mean, I was a little surprised, but at the same time, just the way McMaster played defense in that game, and that's the way they won it. I mean, that goal line stand that they did right at the end of the first half, that sealed the victory, I think, in my opinion, and that really changed the momentum. They could have went into the break at tied at 10. They went in at 10-3, and then, of course, in the second half, they took off. So I'm not really all that surprised, although I was flying the Mustangs flag all season long. But really, their defense is shoddy, and it was shown in that game. And they just couldn't get the running game going, and McMaster knows that that's their strength. And if Western can't get the running game going, and of course, I don't even know if Donnie Marshall should have been out there. I mean, he was just so banged up. But you got to tip your hat to him, and you got to tip your hat to the Marauders as well, because they played a fantastic game.
Yeah, absolutely. That 102-yard touchdown pass from Quinlan to DeCroce, obviously the huge play in that game. But I guess you couldn't really expect anything more from Donnie Marshall, missing 4 or 5 weeks of game action, just being thrown to the Wolves in a conference championship game.
Yeah, he was a little stiff out there, but it's not like he didn't have his opportunities. There were 4 trips into the green zone for the Western Mustangs in that first half, and they came out with 3 points. Special teams let them down a little bit. There was a missed field goal. There was a bobbled snap. That should have been 6 points, and they just didn't finish drives. So Marshall was moving the team effectively in the first half, but when you leave that many points on the field, you're bound to lose against a team like McMaster, who has such a great defense and a defense that's a veteran defense.
Yeah, absolutely. McMaster winning their first OUA title since 2003. They won 4 straight from 2000 to 2003. They now take on the Acadia Axemen, a team that you were watching out for at the beginning of the season. What are you thinking of this semifinal matchup in Moncton?
Well, Acadia is not playing at home. You bring up a good point that they will be playing this game in Moncton, so there will be a home location or home region advantage, but not necessarily a home field advantage. That actually may work for Acadia, because we know that Touchdown Atlantic has been supported so well in that area when the CFL comes out and they draw 20,000 for a game there. The Canada Game Stadium, a little smaller for this one. If they can draw 8,000 or 9,000 of this game, they will have a very unique home field advantage without question. I think they can move the ball on offense through the air, and they're another team, just like McMaster, that had 10 guys returning on the defensive side of the ball. And that's one of the reasons why I picked them to finish ahead of St. Mary's at the start of this year.
Andrew, you obviously had picked the Purple Ponies to go into the bowl game here. What are you thinking of McMaster's chances against Acadia?
I like them a lot. I think McMaster's actually going to stomp Acadia in this semifinal. Kyle Quinlan has just been a man possessed. If he played a full season, he probably would have been a Heck Crichton candidate, maybe even have won it. DeCroce, best receiver in the CIS. With those two guys clicking and the way their defense played last week, I don't see Acadia standing a chance.
I want to ask you, Jim, Kyle Quinlan out for 3 games, 3 or more games with that suspension. What do you think McMaster learned about themselves without their quarterback?
Well, I think the one thing that they learned is that leadership is a team thing sometimes. I think coming into this season, Kyle Quinlan was made the poster boy of this McMaster team. And a matter of fact, if you look at the OUA guide, whose face is on the front of it but Kyle Quinlan? I think, for instance, a team like UBC that has Billy Green as the starter, how would that season have been different if UBC were to have to be forced to diversify and go to a backup quarterback? How would the season have been different for the Regina Rams if Mark Mueller were able to come back into the last couple of games of the season, and how much stronger would the Rams have been? I think that's the question that's been answered by our friends over at McMaster.
Yeah, but the Marauders obviously playing their best football. I mean, 40-plus points in both of the playoffs games. They blew Queens out of the water, 40-13 in the semifinal. The semifinal game, and then of course beat Western. So they're playing some pretty good football. Let's go to the other semifinal. I think this is the one, the primetime game coming up that everyone wants to see. Calgary and Laval, rematch of the last year's Vanier Cup. And it's some really interesting matchups coming up here. You've got Sebastian Levesque, who was second in CIS rushing, first Rouge et Or player to go over 1,000 yards in the club's history. And then, of course, you've got the three-headed monster in Calgary. But also, Laval's known for their defense as well. They're number one in the country, stopping the run as well as points against.
Yeah, I think when you take a look at this game, I think the battle will be decided in the interior of the Laval offensive line. I think we saw a bit of that in the game between UBC and Calgary, where Sam Hurl and Verdoni, as I mentioned earlier in this segment, did a great job of attacking the inside of the line, led by Lyndon Gaydosh. I know that Laval had some problems with the O-line in terms of injuries at midseason. That has been corrected. If they can move things around enough with Gaydosh, I think Calgary has a chance. If they can get enough pressure on Prudhomme, the Laval quarterback, I think they have a chance. But at this stage, even though this game is being played in Calgary, even though Laval has to make the trip to Calgary and kick this game off at 10:30 Eastern Time, I still pick the Rouge et Or because they are that strong and they are that physical in every part of the game.
Interesting. Laval is all-time 1-4 on road playoff games as far as bowl games. Calgary 3-0 in bowl games at McMahon Stadium. Andrew, what are you thinking of this game, Calgary-Laval?
I really hope that people of Calgary come out to watch this game more than anything, because every time you see a game from McMahon Stadium, it just doesn't seem like there's enough people out there watching the games. And really, the Dinos, they could pull this off. I'm going to pick Laval. I think Laval is the stronger team front to back. But at the same time, you can't sell out Eric Dulesky. He's a fantastic quarterback. And then Stephen Lumbala, I just love that kid. And I think that he could have just one of those monster games. But Jim's right. If Laval can stop the rush, it'll be theirs to win.
Yeah, it's really hard to go against Laval, but I'm going to make my pick, and I'm going to go with the upset and pick Calgary at home here. I know you guys have had your chance to pick the upsets, and we all know how that's turned out. Let's see how mine turns out. But just Calgary, I think their running attack with the three-headed monster. I know Sebastian Levesque has been great for Laval so far this season, but with the way Dulesky's playing as well, and their defense, I think Calgary's going to squeak one out at home and go to the Vanier Cup.
Next week on CIS Countdown, we'll give our picks for the year-end awards. We'll look at who we think is going to win the Peter Gorman Trophy for Rookie of the Year. It's between Jacob LeBlanc out of Mount Allison, Sherbrooke quarterback Jeremy Doyen-Rock, Western's rushing sensation Tyler Varga, and offensive lineman Jordan Arco from Saskatchewan. The award will likely pit the colorful Jeremy Doyen-Rock against Tyler Varga. Even as a rookie, Rock was third in CIS passing with over 2,300 yards in 9 games, 264 yards a game. He led the Vanier to a 7-2 record, 2 more wins than 2010, and earned them a home playoff game. Meanwhile, Varga burst onto the CIS scene this season, scoring 7 touchdowns in his first 2 games. He ended up with 15 rushing scores to lead the nation by a long shot. Varga finished his true freshman year with 799 yards in 7 games, 114 yards a game to end up third in the nation. Next is the J.P. Matras Award for Outstanding Down Lineman in the CIS. Acadia defensive tackle Jake Thomas finished second in the nation with 9 sacks. Laval's Arnaud Gascon-Nadon, Queens defensive end Osi Akwoma, and Regina's Akeem Hicks are also up for the award. Hicks, the highly touted recruit out of LSU, was best in the Canada West with 6.5 sacks on the season, 6th overall across the nation. He was part of a ferocious Regina Rams front four that combined for 18 sacks in 2011. Akwoma is another guy who will get some play for the award. He finished the year with 6 sacks and 27 tackles as one of the nation's premier rush ends. And finally, there's Gascon-Nadon, who finished 4th in CIS sacks with 4 on the season, helping Laval's dominant defense win its 9th straight Dunsmore Cup, giving up just 14 points so far in the postseason. Then there's the President's Trophy. We're not talking hockey here. It goes to the CIS Defensive Player of the Year. Another Axeman is up for the award. Linebacker Tom Lubinsky, who will go up against Concordia backer Max Caron, Ryan Chemlewski from the OUA champion McMaster Marauders, and Sam Hurl from the four-time Canada West champions, the Calgary Dinos. Hurl's been a leader on the Calgary defense the last 4 years, this year finishing 5th in CIS tackles with 52 in 8 games. He sets the tone for the Dinos with his physicality. There's also Chemlewski, the Marauders' fifth-year senior, who's critical to that defense. He led the team with 40 tackles and 4 sacks in 2011. But the likely favorite will be Caron, who was a beast for the Stingers this season. Caron led the nation in tackles with 78.5 on the year and also had 5 interceptions, one that he took back for a touchdown. His stellar play helped Concordia make the Quebec playoffs with a 4-5 record. And of course, next week we'll talk about which player should be honored with the prestigious Heck Crichton Trophy as the CIS's most valuable player. There's Sherbrooke receiver Simon Charbonneau, the Quebec representative who tied for a CIS best 8 touchdowns in 2011, the nation's leading receiver Michael DeCroce from McMaster, and a pair of quarterbacks, Kyle Graves out of Acadia and UBC pivot Billy Green. Green, who was tops in the nation in passing, led the Thunderbirds to a 6-2 record and the program's first playoff game in 12 years. He threw for over 2,500 yards and 20 touchdowns while rushing for another 482 yards on the ground and 4 scores. Axeman QB Kyle Graves is the Atlantic Player of the Year after helping the program win its first Loney Bowl in 5 years. Graves finished 10th in CIS passing with 1,856 yards and had an outstanding touchdown-to-interception ratio of 17 TDs to 5 picks. And the OUA choice, Michael DeCroce, will also be in the mix. He led all receivers in the CIS this year with 113 yards a game and 6 touchdowns through the air. He's been great so far for McMaster in the postseason as well.
Just a reminder of those national semifinals coming up on Friday. Acadia versus McMaster in Moncton in the UTEC Bowl, and the much-anticipated rematch of last November's Vanier Cup between Calgary and Laval. This time it's on Calgary's home turf at McMahon Stadium. That's all the time we have here on CIS Countdown. I'm Chad Klassen. Enjoy what should be 2 great football games leading up to the Vanier Cup next Friday here in Vancouver. We'll be back here in 7 days to break down the matchup from inside BC Place, which hosts the big game, of course. Looking forward to that. We'll see you then.
CIS Countdown is brought to you by Canada Safeway. Canada Safeway is a proud sponsor of the 2011 Vanier Cup, November 25th in Vancouver.